Hey friends, my name's Steve Guttenberg. This is my friend Robert. How you doing, Robert?
I'm good, thanks.
So I feel kind of guilty. I had a very bad influence on your life, and a lot of what's here and we're going to discuss today is a result of my where I've led you down a path. But it wasn't really just me. As I'm saying, I'm not, because I see the freaking Sansui down there. Your father did this. It was really his fault, not mine.
He's responsible for so many things in my life. He's responsible for me being a photographer, which would be like the biggest thing because that's my job.
Right.
And and like all dads, they're into photography, and they're into hi-fi.
Right.
If you're of a certain age.
Right.
So he was. He was my first introduction to hi-fi because that's what he did. And when I was a kid, we had this Sansui, which is actually this Sansui.
Right, I'm going to get closer for that because that's an important thing. This is a touchstone in your life.
Yeah.
So what model is it?
So it's the G6700. This is the actual product literature that we would have got. I went with him to the hi-fi retailer, which would have been
in Canada.
In Canada, yeah. And see, they used to make these beautiful.
Yeah. Holy moly! Look at that.
I mean, how would you not know that
the internet can't do this?
How would you know that this is not good?
It's so
because
good.
It tells you what the slew rate is.
Oh my God, slew rate's important.
Yeah. So
you slew me.
So this amp was $650 in 1982.
Which you figured is how many dollars today?
And I figured out that's about $2,000. So that was that was a big spend.
Yeah, I'd say.
From my dad. So he was going whole hog. He also had a dual. He had a dual, not the 1009, but he had a 1019, which was like the classic dual. And this is, he probably got this in 1962.
Cool.
And at that point, we had an ICO ST70.
Which is tubes?
Which is tubes, all tubes. And he built that actually from a kit. So, as I said, he kind of like did all this. And even before that, before I was born in the 50s, he had a Wharfdale mono speaker that he built, sand-filled baffle, which had like a 15-inch woofer and massive drivers. And I remember as a kid, he hooked this up just unassembled, sitting on the bench. And it was an early, kind of startling audiophile, like this thing makes realistic sound in a strange way. And so
you were startled.
Yeah,
by the
I was
realism.
kind of startled, and it had a real kind of like tactile thing, which is I think what has informed a lot of other experiences. So
like your Zoo speakers.
Yeah, like
which
the Zoo speakers.
We're going to get to. Yeah. That's comes later in the story. So, by the way, before we get back, so which Zoo is this? Which model of this Zoo is
this? Is the Soul Supreme.
Soul Supreme. Okay. Yeah. But we're going to get back there.
Yeah. So I mean, like childhood, like teenage years, and then there's a gap. There's a gap through college, because you didn't have any money, and there's a gap basically until I got to New York in 1996, which was move to New York, be a photographer, do that whole thing.
And that's when we met.
And I met you, and I met your friend David, who was also on this channel.
Right.
And Dave had a studio on Broadway.
Yep.
And he had a procession of hi-fi gear that went through there like
oh my God,
like signposts on the highway of audio. It just.
But some of them stick in your memory, like the Carver Amazing speakers.
Right. So I think probably the first speaker he had in there was the Carvers, which are these really they look like surfboards.
Right. Big dipole speakers. They kind of, for people that don't know what they look like, they look a lot like apogees, actually.
Yeah, they were about 6 feet tall and about 3 feet wide, and there's a pair of them. And like he had a big space, and they really filled that space. But I think the interesting thing that you've just kind of pointed out to me is that they have an open back.
Right. They were open baffle with I think 3 12-inch drivers.
Yeah.
I think.
Or maybe 4, yeah.
Yeah, so that it kind of brought you back to as a kid hearing that raw driver on the bench.
So they have a really raw kind of like kind of tactile sound
and a ribbon tweeter.
A
big long ribbon tweeter.
And so like he had those, and he had like the Gallo ball speakers.
Yeah.
And so this was the first real kind of like kind of true audiophile experience, I guess you could say. So I mean, that was like a face melting kind of audiophile experience.
Yeah, you don't hear those every day, kind of thing.
No, and it really, I mean, like I think it changed my idea of what was possible because I mean, like my dad had like the AR2As, which are a very staid, like closed box speaker, and this was just like more than anything. So. So then I think another 10 years went by, which we're going to just say work.
So it's interesting that didn't get you to actually do any audio stuff for yourself. The long exposure to Dave King's system didn't make you say, I gotta get some of that for me. Well, you got your little technique stack, right?
Well, right, yeah, there was, So at some point, it's like like you're in like an apartment and you need something to listen to. So I did go to JNR and I did buy, like a Technics mini system,
which lives on here.
Which parts of it live on, parts of it had met the great dumpster in the sky. But yes. So then I think it was about 2009 that. And I really forget where it started, but I think Dave, being like another like enabler, loaned me some
the AdCom.
Yeah, the AdComs.
Right.
And
I loaned you,
or
gave you, or sold you those Fluence
speakers,
right.
Which was kind of like home theater. It was like a 3-way home theater.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then I bought a Project turntable.
A Debut,
the entry level. And that was kind of like that was the nucleus basically, and then you get the sort of like the upgrade-itis.
But no, you stayed pretty stable with that for a while.
Well, I bought a Shure MX97 cartridge, and broke all the leads putting it on, and then rewired the tone arm, which was you probably don't want to do that.
No, I definitely.
And then I sold that, and then after that, I think I heard your Zoos.
Yeah, Zoo Druid 4.
Was it the 4 or was it the 5?
No, 4.
The 4s.
4? No, 5.
I think it was the 5s. Yeah. So that was kind of like a return to this very kind of like immediate kind of tactile thing, and I think I always kind of know that. For me, it's the sort of like the boogie factor. It's like the bum moving factor. If you're not enjoying, if you're not having fun, and also it's probably just the fact of being a child of the '80s. So rock music and dance and pop was all very kind of dance movement oriented.
Right.
So I mean, like I did, like play like a saxophone in high school and in college, and I had a whole jazz side, but I'd never really, listened to jazz music like a thing, which sounds.
So, but how long did you study sax?
All through high school and the first 2 years of college.
Oh,
yeah.
So you could really play.
No. No, I had a real modicum of a soupçon of talent that was not
6 years. That's a long run.
Yeah, but I mean it wasn't a good run.
No.
So so that leads us to the Zoos. So the Zoos were kind of like the first kind of high-end purchase, and it wasn't from a brick and mortar. It was from an online retailer. Right.
And you sent letter, you emailed back and forth to Sean?
Emailed Sean back and forth, and that was, and he was like, welcome to the Audiophile Club. What can I serve you?
Yeah.
And I mean, they were just really, really good with me, and they've still been good because I've had more questions, and we bought some, like I bought cables, I bought some, other things from him, and.
Right.
And it's just been really good. And I think also just like they get the kind of music that I would listen to.
It's not like most audiophile speaker companies, right? They're way more in tune with you.
Yeah, and so I think I just kind of like appreciate where they're like coming from, and I think that they're doing it at a really high level, especially at the price point. So
yeah.
Yeah. So because they're like super efficient, that means that you can go down the low power rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. So then there's a bunch of, we're going to skip over a bunch of things because it is a long story, but you got this Almaro.
Yeah.
This is an A205A, right?
Yeah, the 205A Mark II.
Okay.
And the guy who had it before me, Jeff, who was on your channel also.
Right. Who also had Zoos.
had this before me, and he did some tube rolling. And this and the zoos was kind of like that's a real nice, I mean, I had that for 2 solid years, and that was a really golden, it's not it's not the loudest, but it does things that...
It does the tube thing.
It does things, and it's not it's just good.
Yeah.
So that's the zoos. And then
you changed turntables along the way, right? You got the
So then, like, the project went out, and then we can talk about the Rega. So so that was a brick and mortar purchase. I went to In Living Stereo here, and Jeff was really great at because I was
not Jeff. Steve. There's 2 Steves there. One of the 2
Steve.
Steves.
I'm sorry, Steve. Yeah. And I was in and out of there, like half a dozen times with albums that he, sat me in the chair and played, and that was a good experience. And so that's a Rega RP3 and a Dynavector.
Yeah, I'm gonna get over there in a second. Yeah. But so it's not here now, but I did lend you a J2 briefly, and that seemed to be a monumental so awakening.
So that's okay. So this only has 5 watts aside,
right?
And so so you sort of wonder, well, what if we had 10 watts? What if we had 20 watts?
Right.
And so like the J2 is kind of like, as tubey as you can get in solid state. And so I lived with that for a little bit, and that might be like a sort of like a forever purchase. But in the meantime, you got to save up your $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for that.
Right. So today,
Steve
on the way
says,
over here,
why don't we?
Let's take this puppy over here.
Try the Schiit.
Yeah. Because you already had some other shit. I'm going to show that in a second.
Yeah,
so this is the Agir. How do you think you pronounce it? Maybe you're
I think it's Agir.
Agir? Okay. Agir. Agir. You say Agir, I say Agir.
Yeah.
It's the Class A 10 watt or 20 watt, depending on how you're counting.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to compare this just, for as long as I can, like against the J2, to hear what it does the same, what it does differently, but just in the half an hour that we had it running, I can see that it's doing a lot of good things already. And
so then, we'll get to the other ship, but let's just do the Rega since we mentioned it. So it's a which Rega?
So it's a Rega RP3, and
it's a cartridge?
Yeah, it's a Dynavector 10x3, which I think was the kind of thing that Steve in Living Stereo, he sort of said, this is kind of like at your price point, because I think I shopped it as a price point. I said, I've got about 1,500 or so, and this is what he recommended, and I've been really, and it's actually gotten better. Like, it's just gotten better. The like the cartridge breaks in, and it's kind of surprising how long that can take. Actually, is that there's always more.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Or, you move the speakers.
Big difference.
And it sounds different again. So there's a lot of,
And then that's going into the Schiit Manny.
So the Manny is down here. And the Manny has been on for like the 4 years, I think I've had it. And it's never been turned off.
Nice. Because fully warmed up.
Because you can't get around the back to turn it off. Right. But it's perfect.
And then the Schiit Freya.
And then it's the Freya. So... so the Freya came in because I needed a pre after the Almaro went out, and I was kind of in the Schiit family.
Right. You were getting full of shit.
So I decided, let's just go for a big Schiit and get the Freya.
And you get the tubes, and you get the buffer, and you get the tubes, passive.
You get the buffer, and you get the passive. And so,
So it's funny that we were just listening. And I asked you to, because you were listening through the tubes, because you say you almost always listen with the tubes. And I said, let's go to the buffer. What?
Yeah, 99% of the time.
Yeah, almost all the time. And I said, let's hear the buffer. And I preferred the buffer. You preferred the tubes. And that's the way it goes, right? Yeah. At least with that music that we were playing at that moment.
Yeah, although it's not like a switch based on the music. It's just stayed in the tube mode. And in fact, those aren't the stock tubes. Just on the one side, I replace the tubes that came with it because
you didn't like them
because no one likes them.
No one likes them.
If you read the internets, no one likes them.
Okay.
But anyway, that's fine. And that was a good match with the J2 as well, actually. Yeah. So now we're seeing if it's going to be a good match with the Eger.
Eger. All right. So the other thing I wanted to bring up was that question about, because when I was selling hi-fi, I noticed a lot of my customers were photographers. When I say photographers, I mean professional photographers. And that I see some kind of connection there, that you're trying to capture some kind of reality, or there's some resolution issues. I don't know. What is it I'm looking for there?
Well, yeah. I mean, for some, maybe not me. I think this really
not you.
This is not me. But there is a a lens is sort of like a transducer in some ways.
Right.
It takes like a reality and it compresses it and it puts it on a medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, maybe the more apt thing that I could kind of like say something about that makes sense is that like the vinyl record and like the negative, they're very much analogs.
Okay.
It's an actual trace. It's a trace of reality because it's like light has to hit the emulsion to form a silver grain, and sound has to hit the transducer to actually make a scratch in a record. And so the fact that there's, which means it's not at all like digital. It's like you can actually see the grooves, you can see the grain.
Right.
And
like you can see the image in the negative.
Like you can see the image in the negative. And also I think that because there's a limit, there's a hard limit, that it leaves a little bit to the imagination. And I think that's maybe, if I had to explain why people like analog versus the other, is that your brain gets engaged for the last 2%. Because there's just there's the noise floor, there's hiss, there's grain, there's something that's in your way.
Right.
And then that little bit of frustration causes the brain to fill in the rest. It's like when you read a book, you can't see the people,
right.
but you imagine the rest.
Right.
And I think that you don't quite get that with digital because there's no medium. There's no there's no canvas. There's no negative. There's no vinyl. There's no like impediment. So that's about as philosophical as I can get.
That's good. I like that. That's good.
So yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, that's maybe the only way that sound and photography are, similar for me.
Well, I'm glad I asked because I've never thought of it exactly that way before. Anyway, I think we're good.
Good.
My name's Steve Guttenberg. This is Robert. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show in Brooklyn. Robert lives in Brooklyn too. And thank you guys for watching. Hope you come back again real soon. And we're done. See ya.